Okay, kids, it's time for another episode of the Fueled by Weird podcast, the only podcast where being weird isn't an option, it's mandatory. I'm Chris Daly, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Frank Martin. Frank, how's it going today, man?
Hi, I am super sweaty and happy to be here.
Yeah, it's
Not
hot.
necessarily in that order.
Yeah, I get it. It's a hot one today. Luckily, I'm in my basement, which seems to be the cooler part of the house. So hopefully we can stay by ourselves unless my family decides they want to migrate their way down here. So
No, I got the air conditioner on and a bunch of dogs that are gonna annoy me for the next 45 minutes, but that's okay.
nice.
I
All
wouldn't
right.
have it any
Well,
other.
that works. Well, for people who don't know, you and I have known each other online for a while, and this is the first time we've actually been able to talk face to face, which is kind of nice.
I
Uh,
don't think that's true.
I don't know.
I don't think
It's
that's true.
it's it's been a while that we've just kind of chatted, but I don't remember if we've ever talked face to face before.
I've done so many of these, I can't remember anymore, but I'm pretty sure you're on my reoccurring guest list.
Fair enough. Well, either way, I like to start these things off with an icebreaker question. So today's icebreaker question is: when you are stressed, what do you do to relax?
Oh, geez. When I am stressed, what do I do to relax? I don't know. There's many things I do to relax. I drink, I smoke, I take showers in the dark with spa music playing and candles lit, you know?
Nice. That's a nice one.
Video games are a good one.
Ah,
Video games are definitely a good one. Anything that involves being away from my family, pretty much. That's that's
understood.
usually what I do to relax. Get away from get as far away from the people who matter as possible.
Fair enough. You got to kind of unwind a little bit. Yeah, I try to do video games too. I never give myself enough time to play because I think if I'm playing video games, I could be doing something else. So really, when I sit down to relax, I just get more stressed out. I
I
think
I justify it by saying, as a writer, I am experiencing other stories, so I'm adding to my repertoire. That's my justification for playing video
there you
games.
go.
But
That's
you know what? I feel that. I feel I can't play like I mean I can like those 30-hour games
yeah,
and those long RPGs. I can do them, but I don't have as much time anymore. So I like the shorter indie games, the
yeah,
like the experience, they're kind of visceral and they're different or they're whimsical and they're just abstract. I check on how long it takes to beat a game before I start playing it. If it's like 4, 5, 6 hours, I'll hop on in. But if it's like 40 hours, you gotta explore every single dungeon, get everything. I'm like, I don't know if I have the capacity for that anymore.
fair enough. All right, well, the concept of the show Fueled by Weird is basically, all the things you're into, your hobbies, your interests, and all that stuff are what make you who you are and essentially what fuels your weird. So, what is it that you're into? Your hobbies, your interests, that kind of stuff. What makes Frank tick?
I don't know. I don't know. I like a bit of everything,
Okay,
which is if anybody who's looked at the comics that I've made can say like this guy doesn't know what he likes. And that's not true. I like everything. I think I try to meet things where they are. So if my wife makes me watch Bridgerton with her, Frank would be bored, but
sure.
Frank the guy who likes sci-fi and action and all that stuff would probably be bored. But you know what? Frank the connoisseur of storytelling and the writer who likes to analyze plot points and character developments can find something interesting in that, look at it from an analytical point of view. So I try to judge things by what they are, not by what I want them to be, which is not always easy, when we have
Sure.
expectations going to the things that we like.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at things because, my wife, she's into a bunch of stuff that I'm not really interested in or don't really care for, but that's actually a good way to look at it because, if you don't go into it at the subject matter, you go into it looking for, a different aspect of a story or a different story. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I'm looking to expand my writer's toolbox, so I'm
Okay.
always coming at every media that I absorb or experience from that arena, how
Sure.
can I use this thing that I'm watching to benefit my own writing? So I'm not a huge rom-com fan, but I'll watch them because at some point in time I accidentally write rom-coms,
Yeah.
and it's favorable to know how they work, to know how they tick, to know what the ins and outs, the various tricks that make these stories work and what makes them not work. So everything I'm consuming it from how can I use it to benefit myself.
Awesome. That's a definitely a good way to look at things. I'm gonna have to
It
reevaluate.
it is a good way to look at things. It's also a curse in a way because you're constantly watching something and you're like, how can
Sure.
I make this better? You know,
Yeah.
I like, for instance, I'm not a musician. I love
Okay.
all kinds of music, and I just put on a track, I hit play, and I just listen to it, and I enjoy it as a fan. I can't really do
Yeah.
that for stories. You know, I'm constantly breaking it down in my head, and my OCD writer brain is in overdrive every time I consume something. So it's hard to just sit back, relax, and enjoy something without that analytical mode going
Sure.
on.
That's fair. Well, speaking of speaking of your writer brain, what was it originally that got you interested in becoming a writer in the first place?
I don't know. This goes back like way back. Elementary school was when I really started just writing my own stories. And I think it was the fact that I kept coming up with them and they wouldn't go away unless I wrote them. You
Sure.
know, I would constantly have this thing in my head, and it would be, and even now, when I have an idea, it's constantly churning, and I'm thinking about how to make it better and how to develop it. And that really doesn't stop until it's on the paper, you know, until it's a real thing, and then I can move on to the sequel or the next one, and then I get tortured by it. But yeah, I write because it's just in my brain, and unless it's out of my brain, then it will continue to take up space and annoy me.
I can relate to that too. I know that, for a while I was trying to work on one specific story, but then, for some reason I had this idea to start writing some kind of a medieval type King Arthur Knights of the Round Table story. So I figure I'll just put that away. I'll work on my other thing, but that kept creeping in. So I was like, fine, I won't even write the whole thing. I'll just write what's in there. So it's stashed away somewhere completely unfinished, but I needed to get it out so I could move on and go to the next thing. So yeah, I get it.
Oh, those unfinished things haunt me. You
Yeah.
know, it's kind of like the girl that got away. Every
Yep.
once in a while, I have this. I had an idea, like I don't know, high school or college. For one reason or another, I didn't pursue it, and it's like that crush that you never asked out. You know, it's you could always ask yourself, "What if I did this thing?" And every once in a while, those things that I never developed because they were so timely, I can't just like do it now for whatever reason. Shut up. It's hey, 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 I'm talking here. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I get it. It's almost like instead of the girl that got away, it's like the girl that tried to get away but just doesn't want to leave and just kind of just hangs over you.
Yeah, yeah. And I like some stuff I could pick up now. Like I had an idea back then, or a story that I wrote back then that I think has potential. I could pick it up and start writing again. But there's some
Yeah.
stuff that I just either it's from a medium I've moved on for, or there were certain personnel in place that I needed to do it, and then now they're no longer in my life. It's just, yeah, those things call me. I'm gonna have to beat the crap out of you. Puppies, what can you do?
It's very
I'm
busy.
getting them out of here.
Okay, fair enough.
Let's go. Get out of that room. Take them. Go play with them. Put them in the crate. Do that. Intermission over.
Fair enough. All right. So, when it comes to writing, I know that, in addition to, comics and novels, you also are known for writing reviews and articles for several different online publications. How do you switch your writer brain going from, writing an article to writing a story, or is there a big shift that you have to undertake to change gears?
I don't think so. Like I said, I'm always in that analytical writer brain. So even when I'm watching something as a watcher, I'm still thinking it as a writer, you know?
Sure.
I'm looking of ways that the character arcs could have been improved, the plots could have been improved, whether the tone works, whether the setting was right. And through that comes my analysis. And I'm like I said, I'm meeting things when they where they are, which helps me as a reviewer because I'm not judging them as a fan that wants things to be a particular way, you know. I'm viewing it as a writer of ways that the story can be improved based on what they are. So I don't think there's a difference between the two. It's just the same type of brain, but looking at things from another angle, rather than looking at something from this is raw and I need to create from it. I look at it as something finished, and how would I have approached it to make it stronger?
That's fair. Now, when it comes to writing reviews, as someone who occasionally writes a review myself, it sometimes can be pretty mentally taxing just to try to, for me anyway, to form an opinion where, you kind of don't want to give the story away, but you want to give enough of the story to kind of draw the person in and make them interested in wanting to read the story or watch the show or the movie or whatever have you might be writing the review on. What are, some tips that you would have, to help write a good review? Or what are, when you're going to sit down to write a review, what are some specific points that you hit when you're writing a review?
Oh, I don't know. I never really think too hard about whether it's going to be a spoiler review or a spoiler free review. I always go in. Well, so the way my reviews work is I have like an intro, and then which basically I don't even talk about the work in and of itself. I basically, it's a preamble to my finer point, my ultimate end argument. I kind of like introduce depending on the point I want to make, I might talk about the history of the genre, or I might talk about the return of nostalgic IPs and what that means for or media at large. And I might kind of like preamble how I'm going to approach the subject. And then I do a little, would come the synopsis. And as far as how much I put in there, I don't know. I don't really think about it. I think most of the reviews I write, I don't really care about including spoilers, but I don't get, and it's a paragraph, so it's not like I'm doing a beat by beat thing and giving away the complete ending.
Yeah.
But I want to basically give enough details to justify my opinion, which will be the final paragraph I do, which is kind of like my closing argument, where I state why I think something was strong based on the intro, or why something I thought was weak based on my intro. And I basically use the synopsis as evidence for that argument. So I guess it's got a lot more structure than I anticipate, but for the most part, I view it as just like a free extension, a free writing extension of my opinion. So I don't really put a lot of thought into it. I just kind of dive in and write how I'm feeling based on whatever it is I consumed.
That works.
I'm not doing bullet points is
Yeah,
what I'm not. I don't think about it that hard.
that's fair. That's actually probably a better way to go, just to kind of turn your brain off and just kind of go from instinct.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to think like what a reader is going to. I'm not trying to give the reader a specific thing.
Yeah.
I'm too vain for that. I'm just thinking about how I thought about this thing, and I want to express this opinion. And whether or not you read it or not, that's kind of up to you. But if you care about what I say and you think I at least pretend to know what I'm talking about, then then my reviews are how you will get inside my brain for any particular thing.
Very nice. Now, when it comes to writing, like I mentioned before, and like you kind of mentioned before, you kind of write a whole bunch of different things. So what was it that led you down the road to getting into writing comic books?
It was as simple as loving to write stories and loving to read comics. When I say I like to write stories, I really don't consider myself a writer. I consider myself more of a storyteller. I love stories in general, and it doesn't matter what medium it is. It could be prose novels, it could be poetry, screenplays. I've never written a stage play, but I would love to. Because I just love the act of telling a story, and comics is just another aspect of that. I loved
Sure.
reading comics, I love consuming them, and if I wanted to tell stories, I fit naturally into stuff that I feel comfortable for, and I love reading comics, so I try to tell stories by writing comics, and I thought I was incredible in the beginning, and it turns out that I was not. So there's a lot that translates, a lot's universal in terms of storytelling, and then there's a lot that's specific to the medium. And you're not going to just come right out of the gate knowing what those specific fundamentals of comic storytelling are. That's just boot camp, getting
Yeah.
in the nitty gritty of writing scripts, of producing a comic and putting it out there. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but you learn from your mistakes. And the benefit of being in the comics community is there's everybody who makes comics understands how hard it is, and nobody wants to hoard their wisdom. Everybody wants to share it. If you ask questions, people are going to give you a bunch of different answers. So that's one of the great things about the community of making comics, is that we share a lot as far as what works and what doesn't.
That's fair. And I think I would agree with you to a point. I think that applies to most people. I know, back a while back, I for a while got the wild hair to try to get into comics. So I kind of just posted, what's, give me some tips or whatever, just to try to get the ball rolling. Because one thing that I have a problem with that I've talked about tons of times before is when I do writing, I mostly do prose, and I just can't figure out, and I think I'm probably thinking about it too hard, but I can't switch over from prose to script writing. I just can't get my head around it for whatever reason. And that's probably the thing I reached out about was, what's a good way to get into script writing? And most of the answers I got were just Google it. And I did get a few really good answers. There were a few people that were very genuinely helpful. They even reached out via DM and gave me some advice. But the biggest one I got was Google it. And I was like, come on. I get that, you got where you are now and you probably had to get out there on your own, and that's fine. You appreciate it more. And I get that, but like you said, there's a really big community of people that are willing to help. So it's just kind of weird to me that a lot of people still have that like protective, almost kind of like a gatekeeping thing.
Well, first off, anything anybody says about anything is a generality. There
Sure.
are a-holes everywhere. And
Sure.
I think social media has amplified that a lot, where people love to take that position of the negative Nancy and shooting people
Sure.
down. And that's not fun. Um, but I'm in a lot of places. I'm a huge fan of, like I said, I don't really like social media, but I've been leaning a lot more into Discord, which feels a lot tighter. Like Discord servers feel tighter than like just the open air of Facebook
Yeah.
and Twitter. And in those communities, I think you'll get a lot more of a friendly response, just because it eliminates a lot of that. I'm going to say something negative, and now everybody will see it and know that, like, I told them what's up. So
Yeah, I
I
agree.
think I think Discord eliminates that a lot. Also, I think anybody that's worth a grain of salt in the comics community that has put in the time and has been doing this for a long time, they want to help. Anybody that's been doing it for a year or two, they put out a book or two and they think they know everything, will give you that Google an answer. But at some point in time, you just get so worn down, and this industry has broken you so much that you're just like, I want to help everybody I can, because it's
Yeah.
just you just, it humbles you, and it's just like there's no point in being a dick to people. So it, if somebody wants to make a comic, and if they're going to Google it, if they want to make it that bad, why not just give them a little tip, or don't say anything at all? Like,
Yeah. That sometimes is more helpful.
yeah, yeah. So, people suck sometimes.
It's true. And to quote my one of my favorite shows, Metalocalypse, don't be a dick, be a dude.
I think the first time I realized just how open and friendly the comics community could be, I was at C2E2, which is like one of the bigger comic friendly shows.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I had like a book or two out at the time, and I'm from New York, so I flew in just for like a Saturday just to go to the show. And everybody was approachable, nobody really turned around and said, I don't really want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very cool that like top editors and top publishers would um, just kind of gab with you and chat with you and answer all your questions. You wouldn't really get that at a lot of book fairs, like traditional publishing fairs. A lot of editors from like Penguin Random House. They don't want to talk to you, you know, like they don't. Some independent self-published author who has one book on Amazon that they put out themselves. They don't want to chat with you. So, comparatively speaking, I think the comic community is more open. And Hollywood, geez, you can't even talk to somebody unless you have four people in between you. So,
Yeah.
I think it's even though comics people can suck sometimes, comparatively speaking to other industries, I think it's a smaller percentage.
No, I agree.
As sad as that may be.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, I mean, again, I have big, mad respect for the comics community. I agree with you 100%. Most all of them are completely decent, nice human beings, but there are a few bad apples. Luckily, in this instance, a few bad apples don't spoil the bunch. They just make things harder. But for every one kind of not great person, there's, 10 more great people that are willing to help. So,
Yeah, I just and the weird thing about social media is that negative uh content gets more engagement. So
yeah.
people a lot of times like to engage with that. And I don't want to say I've been there, done that, but it's just I feel like it's not worth going down that rabbit hole. Like I got so much else. I got dishes to do and laundry outside
Yeah.
of doing comics.
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
do that. I can't spend half an hour arguing with somebody and then be stressed out for the rest of my night. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. I mean, life's too
So
short to be negative, so why do it?
no, no. I mean, I love being negative, but I love being negative in like a facetious way. I don't want to
For
like
sure.
I don't want to be serious negative. I want to be
Yeah.
goofy negative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sarcasm's a language I speak very well, so I get it. Now, when it comes to comics, like I said, I've kind of followed you for a while. We've been friends for a while, and I've seen you write all sorts of different genre of books. Is there a genre that you haven't written in yet that you still want to write in, or that you haven't written in
I
yet?
don't know. Let's see. I'm trying to think of all the genres there are and what I haven't really done. You know what I haven't done? Like high fantasy.
Okay.
Just straight up Lord of the Rings, kind of Game of Thrones-ish type of story. I mean, I think I've written prose stories like that, short
Okay.
stories and such, but I've never done that in comics.
Sure.
Uh, you know what? I'm just gonna say it. I think that's boring. This
Okay.
is a straight up swords and sorcery story
Yeah.
with like wizards and dragons. I mean, I was comics. There are so many comics out there nowadays. So much of it is high concepts. You got to have a hook. You got to find some way to reach people. And I think just coming up with a plain old Tolkien wizards and elves and gnomes, it's not going to grab people. That's not to say you can't write a great story,
Sure.
but nowadays in comics specifically, it's especially if you're an unknown and you need to sell your story, not yourself, it's gonna be it's hard to do something that's that traditional, you
Yeah.
know. I did a straight up detective noir story and I had a blast with it. And you know what? I think that's there's not as much of that out there. So I think if you just say I'm going to straight hard boiled detective, golden age of Hollywood kind of mystery, murder mystery, it's that will attract people more than if you say I'm going back to basics with a fantasy story.
Yeah, I
So
mean, there's so much of that out there. You're really just going to get lost in the shuffle. So it's not that, not to discourage you for if you have that story and you absolutely write that story. But if you want to be noticed, if you want to be stand out, you got to find a way to make it different.
yeah, yeah. So I think I'm never say never to anything. I would love to
Yeah.
do my own story like that, but the timing has to be right. It has to be right where I have enough of a fan base where people are going to say, I'm going to read Frank's fantasy story because I want to read Frank's fantasy story. Not I'm not going to read this weird elf story because the elves don't have jetpacks or something, you
Yeah.
know?
Speaking of that, your new book, The Fourth Wallflower, you sent me a review copy. It's fantastic. I love this so much. Speaking of, books that stand out, this one was different than, I don't think I've ever read anything kind of like this. It reminded me, and I don't know if this was intentional because we're going to get into that in a minute, but it kind of gave me a throwback to the old Looney Tunes where Bugs Bunny was talking to the artist and throughout the cartoon, it kind of like changed as it went. The scenery, the costume, the story, everything kind of just. And anyone, there's probably a lot of people who aren't going to listen to this, or who are going to listen to this, that are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's going to be a few people that are going to listen that have no idea what I'm talking about. Um, so let's talk about the fourth wallflower a little bit.
Sure.
How did you come up with the idea? What is it? What's the For people who don't know, what's the book about?
The fourth Wallflower is about a self-aware comic character. He knows he's a comic character. He knows he's in a comic, and he communicates with his creator about what type of story he's going to be in. And it takes you from his creation all the way up to building the story, and it eventually turns into a love story, and it has his story unfold. And I don't really know how I came up with the idea. I think I was watching a lot of Bo Burnham at the time, and I'm like, I need to do something weird. I need to do something different. And Wally, the main character in it, he just kind of popped into my head, and he never left. And he said, "I'm a comic character. You're gonna create me. Let's do this thing." And
That's
I
awesome.
did I did not know, like, the weird thing about the story is that it unfolds, it doesn't know what it is in the beginning. It just knows that
Yeah.
it's a comic. And the story unfolds by Wally trying to figure it out. And the weird thing was, that's kind of how I wrote it. I just knew that wanted to make a self-aware comic character, but that's not a story. That's just an idea.
Yeah.
So I was like trying to figure out how I'm going to tell this story the same way that Wally is trying to figure out how the story is going to be told. And eventually I found, it all comes back to theme. I think theme is the strongest aspect of storytelling. And the theme of this story is basically, how can a comic character truly be self-aware if he's in a scripted story, right? I mean, Wally is going through the story, but the story exists. There's a beginning and there's an end. His end is already done when the story
Yeah.
begins. So it's a concept of fate versus free will. How much free will does this self-aware comic character really have if his story is already written? And trying to figure out the dichotomy between those two aspects is the core of the story, and I think that's what makes it strong. Otherwise, it would just be an idea. Otherwise it'd just be a self-aware comic character bumbling around, which is not really a story. Nobody wants to read that. It needs to have something to center it, and I think that's where the center comes from, that theme.
I agree. And yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the cartoon I'm talking about, but yeah, I got a lot of vibes from that one.
So when I put the script out to critique, I had a comic pro read this, and he said, "Oh, Duck Amuck in comics, that's cool." And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And so I Googled Duck Amuck, and Duck Amuck is a Looney Tunes cartoon. Like you said, it's with Daffy Duck, and it's kind of a similar thing. He's talking to the animator, and the animator's like drawing stuff on him, and it's a
Ah,
self.
yep, that's
Yes,
the one.
so it wasn't intentional. I didn't see it, but after I saw it, I definitely saw the similarities and the same vibe. So it's I'm perfectly fine with that comparison, because you know what? Wally is a bit of a Looney Tune himself.
And it's not a direct, it's not a direct correlation, but it felt like it was inspired by that, which is cool because that was, growing up, that was one of my more favorite Looney Tune cartoons, I guess. And so it was cool to kind of see that trope brought back because you don't really see anybody try to kind of explore it that way.
Yeah. I had somebody say that this book is so meta that it stops being meta. And I think that it makes a little bit of sense, in that when you think of fourth wall breaking characters like Deadpool, this is not Deadpool. Deadpool's
No.
in a story, and he might break the fourth wall at some points here and there. This is different. This is a fourth wall breaking character who comes alive without any walls. It's just him on the page talking to his creator, and it's that relationship that fuels the story forward, which Deadpool never really has in the same way.
Yeah, for sure. Now, with a lot of your books, you usually have them as like a fully encompassed story. It's like a one shot, one and done, or, one or part one of two or whatever like that. Do you have any future, not to spoil anything, do you have any future plans for Wally? Do you kind of see where do you kind of see this playing out?
So when I get this question for Wally, I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna let Wally. This was a one shot. I never say never to anything. So Wally's story is told, and the thing about a character that's fourth wall breaking and meta like this, you can't force it. You know, if I sit down and say Wally needs a sequel, and I try to type it out, it's going to come out forced and it's going to come out unnatural, unlike which I believe the original was. So I wasn't there yet. I think last week an idea hit me for kind of a story. And I'm like, you know what, this would work perfect as a sequel to Wally's Tale. So
Awesome.
I got kernels of an idea kind of brewing. With as much as I have on my plate, I don't know if and when I'll ever get to it, but it's a possibility. It's definitely there. And you know what? There also has to be people who want it. And I think anybody who reads this will definitely like Wally and want his story to continue. But comics are tough, man. It's all about those numbers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you don't want to spend a bunch of your time developing a book when, no one's gonna show any interest in it when you could have been spending your time developing something entirely different.
Yeah, right now, I my main thing I'm doubling down on is my Grimspace series.
Yeah.
So I have 6 launches for Grimspace next year. It's going to
Oh,
take up
wow.
my entire slate, and that's what I'm hoping to expand and for a lot of people to jump on board with. So who knows if Grimspace takes off and it becomes as successful as I believe it can, then maybe it can help with a lot of these other books that I want to develop that might not do bigger numbers. But we shall wait and see what the future holds.
Awesome. Well, speaking of that, is there any other things coming up, besides Grimspace that you want to talk about? Anything else for the rest of the year?
So I do 6 Kickstarters a year right now. The fourth Wallflower is coincidentally the fourth of the year. That wasn't planned. Um, you know what? I actually have a campaign launching this July or later this month for on Backer Kit called Captive, which is kind of weird. It was so Backer Kit's doing an event called Comictopia, and I had a book that I was just gonna kind of just put out there that I wasn't planning to do much with, and I saw it as a perfect opportunity to jump on board this Comictopia thing. So it's there's going to be 2 days that my Kickstarter campaign and my Backer Kit campaign overlap,
Oh
and
man.
it's gonna be kind of weird. We'll see how that goes. But that's like so the basic high concept for that is a bank robber is in a hostage situation in a bank with the police outside, but he's already killed everybody inside, and the police don't know it, and he starts being haunted by those victims inside the bank. So
Wow.
so it's a little bit of a high concept crime horror book. And as far as my other 2 Kickstarter launches for the year, I have a sequel to my one of my earlier books, The Macabre Motel.
Ah, that's a
That
good one. I like
that
that
was
one.
another one where people were like, "Are you going to do a sequel for this?" I'm like, "I don't know, maybe." And then eventually one day I was driving and the idea hit me, and I'm like, "Yeah, Macabre Motel too." So
Nice.
that's good. It's gonna be cool. And then I'm doing one of an all ages book. I haven't done a lot, but I love them. Called The Fart Bomb. It's kind of the characters in the book are my family, and it's about my youngest David who kind of terrorizes us. He weaponizes his farts, and I'm looking forward to that one. I think a lot of people are going to get a kick out of it, and it's goofy and it's fun. I love. Doesn't matter how bad it does or how good it does. The simple fact that I was laughing out loud while writing the script is I won already.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Now for final thoughts, is there any advice you want to give to other creatives?
Just keep creating. Just make something. Doesn't matter what it is. It's easy to fall into a hole of no momentum. You know, if you wanna make stuff, write a poem. Come up with an idea, do a piece of art, because once you stop doing, it's easy to stop doing it.
Yeah.
So just that little bit of momentum will carry over until the next day. Set time aside for it. Make sure you do it. And there's no magic bullet to it. You just sit down and do the work. And eventually, if you do enough of it, you think it's going to become refined enough for people to read or watch or listen to or, I don't know, play with.
That's good advice. Once you stop, it is definitely hard to get started again because, a lot of people don't know. You were one of the first. That's how kind of you and I met was I believe it was in Russell Nolte's Discord, and I had posted something that I had written, and you were one of the first people that's not related to me that was actually complimentary of my writing. So that was really exciting for me because, you got the people who are related to you that know you that are gonna, give you your flowers, and they'll just say stuff to be nice to you, but you don't really know if it's a genuine, you know, compliment. But you were very complimentary of my writing, which kind of was really awesome and kind of put that spark in there for me to get going. But then I got busy with other things, and things happened, and the writing kind of just stopped. And I keep talking about, I just recently got a bunch of free time. We're not going to go into that right now, but I keep thinking I'm going to go back into writing this thing, and I just keep not doing it. So that's really good advice, is to make sure you always try and make time for it and do it. Because if you don't, it's really hard to get started again.
Yeah, I get people who reach out to me every once in a while, like yourself, and they want me to read a script or read a short story. If I can't, if I don't have time, I'll let them know. But I always try to find time because I know what it's like to make something and want a genuine opinion.
Yeah.
Not somebody who's gonna toss me fluff and say how great it is, and or somebody who's just gonna shit on it and say how terrible it is. I want somebody who's gonna absorb it, really think about it, and give genuine feedback.
Yeah.
And I think that's rare. It's
Absolutely.
weird. It's weird
Absolutely.
how rare it really is.
Yeah.
So I know what it's like to be in that position. So anytime I'm on the reverse of it, I try to be as upstanding as possible.
No, I agree. It's super hard to find because, regardless of how it is, it's really hard to get people to sit down and take a minute and, read your writing. And one bit of advice I got from somebody was, if you can't make the time to read something from somebody else, they're not going to make the time to read. You can't expect people to read something that you write if you're not going to spend the time to read something that they write, which I thought really kind of hit home because, you can't really expect, it's kind of like the whole, you can't expect someone to do you a favor if you're not going to do a favor for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely true.
For sure. So before we to wrap things up, I'd like to give you a minute to plug yourself. Where can people stay up to date with you with stuff going on, and where can people find out about new stuff?
I'm on the social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Frank the Writer is my handle. The best way to kind of keep up with what I'm doing, frankthewriter.com is my website, and I have a mailing list. I'm pretty good at sending out bi-monthly emails, just kind of stating what I'm doing, what I'm working on, my general thoughts on writing, because I'm such a genius and storytelling guru that you want to read every word that I write. But yeah, that's me.
Very cool. And for myself, you can find the show Fueled by Weird on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And now you can find me on the Spotlight Media GA app, along with a bunch of other great shows, including the Nerdy Man Room Show with Hassel and Monster. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook, just at Fueled by Weird. If you have any questions, comments, you want to join in the banter, send me an email at fueledbyweird.com at fueledbyweird@gmail.com. The music for the show is by Polygon Horizon. They're a great band. Go check them out on Bandcamp. Chris Chandler and Mike Belcher did my logos for the show. Go check them out on the social medias. They're a couple of great guys. And I want to thank brand new sponsor, the Zone Collectibles and More in Tifton, Georgia, your one-stop shop for comics, collectibles, and so much more. And make sure you check out the fourth Wallflower on Kickstarter right now. I'll make sure to put the link in the comments so you guys can go check it out and help spread the word around. And like that, spreading the word of mouth. If you like our show, please leave a review and tell your friends, because word of mouth is our friend. And remember, kids, to embrace the things that fuel your weird and always geek responsibly. Frank, thanks so much for meeting with me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.